and I had to unlearn some things so that I could learn some things.
Pages flipping, sound crisp like the snap of a wrist. Battlefield scars, turn to boardroom scripts. Book stacked, wisdom towering over the mist. Notes zinked in the margins, every word.
Welcome back to Taking Notes. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Ellison. And today we are going to talk about not what we're reading, but what we are not reading. For those of you who don't know, this is National Banned Book Week. And it also includes those books that are challenged. And from the year of 2010 to 2019, of the most challenged books was one book that I read every single day, and that is the Holy Bible. This book out of 100 was number 52 ranked of the most challenged book. And if you go to bannedbooks.org, it keeps an archive. The American Library Association keeps a running tally and list of research and books that are banned. So for those of you who haven't watched my other videos, I talk about how I grew up in a formerly segregated library. I spent my time there. There was nothing in that library that was off limits to me. And because of the background and the society in which I grew up in, the context of the history that I grew up in, it was very important that I was able to read all of those books because you know, my mentors were in books. If I wanted to know something about my body, a lot of times I learned that in a book. If I wanted to learn something about history, I learned it from a book. If I wanted to learn something about, maybe being challenged at school or relationships, a lot of times I learned those things in books. I got to go to graduate school and I had to unlearn some things so that I could learn some things. And there were some pivotal books. And so just to find out that some people can decide one day that they don't like what is read and they can challenge books and try to get books banned is just, fascinating to me. But this is banned and challenge books weeks. And rather than do a book review, I decided to talk about what we're not reading. And for many book readers, they focus on the main narrative, maybe the content of the book, but there are some essential components and types of text that often go unread or unexamined. Today, I'm going to highlight what you might be missing and why it matters for developing a well rounded understanding and also critical thinking skills. And we need those skills, especially today. So, what we're not reading is very important. Now, let me just say this off top. This might not apply to you. So when I say we, it's for those of us who this applies to. I am talking to my former self. And if this doesn't apply to you, just take it and maybe you can talk to your children about it if you're still, educating your adult children, or maybe you have young children in the home, or, maybe one of your brothers or sisters that you talk to, your friends, your girlfriends, your guy friends. But I am just passing along some lessons that I have learned, and maybe you can too. So, among the first thing that I would say that we don't usually read is bibliographies. So if you haven't watched my last book review, I just gushed over how massive the bibliography that the author had in the book. And so that is one of the ways that I discover my next read. That is one way that we can discover the sources and the research behind the book's claims. We can use those to explore further reading and validate information. It helps us to understand references and to grasp a deeper meaning and the cultural context for the book. So, bibliographies, I would say, is something that I would think that we need to read more. It's something that we usually don't read. We kind of scan over that part. We get to the end of the book and then we just don't read that part. And scripture. As I told you, I read the Bible every day, and I was surprised to find out during Banned Book Week that the Holy Bible was a often challenged book on their list. And I do want to read something to you, and it comes from the book of Nehemiah, chapter 8 and verse 8. It says, "They read from the book of the law, and God clearly explained the meaning of what was being read, helping the people understand each passage." And this book of Nehemiah comes from the Bible. And this scripture just further lets me know that even the Lord our God believes that reading is important for our understanding. And so he even helped his people to understand what was being read as they read from the book of the law. And so, even as I think about sometimes how we go to church, or, depending on what faith you are, and we just depend on the religious leaders to do the reading and the studying for us, and we're not even reading our scripture. And so, as I listed out the bibliography, I would also add to the list of things that we don't read. I would say that scripture or our religious text is something that we don't read. And then validating sources of information, checking where facts and figures come from. So oftentimes we just, take it at face value when people start quoting statistics and putting up graphs and charts without really figuring out where did they get that information from, and like how many people did you poll, where did you go to get that information from. And especially in this day and age where there is so much polarization and there's so much contention going on, within our society. So, as we are looking in our books and we're reading, historical narratives and things like that, I would say to look for footnotes and endnotes and citations to assess the reliability of a book. Another thing that I would say that I don't think that we're reading is executive orders and official documents. So I was helping a family member this past week navigate their medical insurance. And so I don't know if you are tracking or not. We have a new administration in place. Things are the government is currently shut down. There are things that are going to happen. If you have any friends or family or loved ones or people that you may go to church with, people that you work with that may be impacted by any government programs, I would say that I don't think we read enough of official documents. So, executive orders, government documents, those things impact laws, policies, and even history. So, reading these can provide firsthand insight into decisions and their implications. So, if we know anyone that has SNAP benefits or Medicaid or Medicare, or people that have children that are on the free lunch or reduced lunch program. I was a young child and I got free or reduced lunch. And, coming up, I didn't understand where that money came from. It was a government program and I'm so grateful for it. But I would say that when it comes to that, I was very ignorant as it concerned civics and our government and how does it work and how do these executive orders work and stuff like that. But if you go to whitehouse.gov, all of the executive orders are there. If you go to your local state website, you can find some of these laws and policies, because let me tell you something, they affect us. And I would say, as we are jumping on board with these popular reading trends, there are definitely some things that we're not reading. And it is okay to check out sometimes, but sometimes we need to check in, or else we may find ourselves at the other end of a law or a policy or some sort of governmental decision that may affect us. And then it would be too late for us to have cast our vote or to have let our voice be heard about some of these things. The next thing I would say that I don't think that we are reading is workplace documents. So, if you work from home, if you have to go out and you are working for someone else, I would say workplace documents and reading them are important. So, as an executive, and I've worked at pretty much every level you can, from the janitor to the C suite. We often think at junior levels and sometimes mid level manager levels that it's my manager's job to give me instruction and tell me what to do, or they should know. But I will tell you, it is highly critical and important that we are reading internal reports and memos and procedural guidelines. If there is something that grinds my gears, y'all, it is poor customer service, or people that are providing a product or a service and they don't even know how their company works, or they're not resourceful, or they don't know how to help you. And a lot of that has to do with because they don't know their own workplace policies and procedures. And so, just to make ourselves polished and professional, I would say that reading workplace documents is essential. They help to shape the workplace, the culture, and the operations. And I know there are some executives at the top. I have worked in the C suite. I work in the C suite, and I'm an executive. So I know there are some people there in those positions who could probably care less. There are some people that have those titles, and they just don't care. There are some counterproductive and toxic workplaces, workplace cultures. But at the end of the day, we are responsible for ourselves and how we move in this world. And customers choose to spend their money with us. And I know when I go places, I like to have good experiences and I like to ask for people by name. And I remember people that give me good service. And so I just think it's important to read workplace documents. The next thing I think that we need to read more of, or that we're not reading, is children's books. Children's books. Stories for young readers often contain valuable life lessons and artistic creativity. So adults can gain new perspectives and appreciate storytelling simplicity. And I really like that. I actually have a children's book I'm expecting in the mail this weekend, and I'm so excited to get it. And I really love children's books because they can take a complex story or narrative or situation and kind of break it down into just like bite size. And I don't think you ever get too old for that. It just helps you to gain new perspectives. And I like it because it allows you to relate to all sorts of people. So I don't have any issues having carrying on conversations with children or young adults or teenagers. And in the field that I currently work in, I have to talk to people of all ages. And I just love the ability to tell a simple story. And sometimes we have the belief that when we become an adult, or you get over a certain age, you get boring, you just start doing the same hem ha routine every day. But children's books are one way to keep you lively and colorful and a little spicy. I love children's books. And I would say we aren't reading enough children's books. The next thing I would say that we are not reading is the about the author section. So whenever I do my book reviews, I do like to highlight the author. Highlighting this section and reading the about the author section provides some context about the writer's background, their influences, and their expertise. We live in a day and age where everybody has a camera, everybody has a microphone. If you take a look at recent news, for Generation Z, that is one of the top career fields that they're looking into going into, and that's becoming an influencer. And so, with that being said, sometimes we can pick up these books. I mean, people are using artificial intelligence to write books. And so, I really like to look at the about the author section and to learn a little bit about the author, like what makes you an expert at this particular topic. I mean, you have 19-year-olds giving people life advice in books. And it's like, how are you qualified to give me life advice? You're really just starting your life. And so, I really like to look at this section and it helps understanding the author can help shed light also on their approach and their perspective on the book. And then lastly, asking critical questions of the material. So I read this book and it is called Asking the Right Questions, A Guide to Critical Thinking. And I really love this book because growing up, I heard a lot about using your brain and having critical thinking skills, but rarely are you ever taught to ask critical questions. And that's one thing that I really like about this book. And there's a quote in this book, and it reads like this: Another step toward using critical thinking in our speaking and writing is effectively incorporating expert opinions into our own voice. Out of a lack of confidence, fear of being wrong, laziness, or even ignorance, we often sponge off the experts. We memorize and quote the work of others rather than doing the hard work of understanding and voicing clearly our own opinions. How often have we read something someone else said and been blown away how well written it is, saying to ourselves, that's exactly what I meant? And I really like that quote. And what I really learned from that book is to question what I'm reading. Now, for those of us who are reading our fantasy books and our romance novels and our books that we like to read to kind of escape from the real world, you really don't want to be doing all this manual brain labor, right? But there are times when we really do need to be asking questions, not only about what we're reading, but the news that we watch, the politicians that we're listening to. We should be asking questions like, why do they want me to believe this? And what makes them an expert at this? And what voices aren't being heard? Who else should I be listening to? Like, we should be asking questions of the text that we're reading, right? Who wrote this and why? What is the purpose and intended audience? Are the sources credible and up to date? How does this information relate to other things that I've read? What perspectives or voices are missing from this material? How might my own biases or experiences affect my interpretation? Now, that last question, how might my own biases or opinions affect my own interpretation? I will tell you, as a woman who has read the Bible several times, my interpretation of it, how I have experienced that book has changed over time. I have books on my shelf that I read probably 20 years ago, and then I read them today, and I'm just fascinated at how different it is reading it years later because, sometimes we're not aware of our own biases or how our experiences shape the way that we interpret information and how we interact with the world. And so that's just a challenge to myself. I would challenge you in that, like asking those critical questions. But, you know, I thought that I would bring what we're not reading. So, by exploring these overlooked elements and asking critical questions, you can deepen your understanding by challenging assumptions and becoming more informed and thoughtful participants in the discussion about the material that you consume. So, I consider myself a participant when I'm reading a book. I become a part of what it is that I'm consuming and reading. And as we observe the world, we take notes through books, business, professionalism, and practice. I'm encouraging you through every chapter of your life. If you need prayer or if you need encouragement, check the description section. And I hope you got something out of this. I definitely have learned some things over the last couple of decades about what I wasn't reading and how I was consuming information. And hopefully, the next time you pick up a book, you'll ask some critical questions, even if you're only asking the critical questions of yourself. But until next time, until my next book review, take notes.
Pages flipping, sound crisp like the snap of a wrist. Battlefield scars, turn to boardroom scripts. Book stacked, wisdom towering over the mist. Notes zinked in the margins, every word's a fist. Smooth grind, pen sharp like a blade in the south. Every line of gospel, words spilling from my mouth. Brand is thick, like the air before a storm. 808's booming, the beast my uniform. Take notes, Bible, every verse a revival. Stack books, survival, from the street to arrival. Battlefield, the boardroom, wisdom my recital. Take notes, Bible, I'm scripting my title. Leather-bound thoughts, stitched tight in the spine. Every step a chapter, I'm redefining the grind. So